All right, I think I've asked this question before. What is the most influential song of the 20th century? Classical, pop, rock, who's got something to guess at?
Blowing in the Wind.
Blowing in the Wind, there's very popular. If I add this to it, does it make a difference? Philosophically speaking, what's the most... Linda, take a shot.
All You Need Is Love.
All You Need Is Love would be a wonderful message. That's not what I'm going for. Here it is. Yesterday? Here it is. It's a song called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Who can tell me how long this song is? You guys, good. It's by jazz composer John Cage. Here's the music in front of you. The reason I bring it up is because it was so influential. It was in the 1950s, where we've been visiting because of my birthday. First time it was performed in New York. He comes over, opens the piano lid, watches for 4:33, shuts it. It's silence. First time it was performed, he likes to mention that there was someone coughing at 2:33. He mentions at 3:33 a number of people stood and walked out. This is a goof, something stupid. It's widely considered the most influential song because it's the first postmodern song. It's the first song to ask of art, architecture, painting, drawing, music, writing, poetry, anything you're doing. What is the role of the listener? You've got a role. It matters what you're hearing. As a matter of fact, this song has never been played the same way twice. As, of course, is the case with every song. Every song is, where does music reside? Cage's head, Hornsby's head? No. On the sheet music, that's sitting inert. At the event happening, sort of. When it's played, it's got to be received. And now we're into great subjectivity. This is the theme of postmodernity. Not just modernity of it matters where you stand, subjective truth. It's post-hypermodernity of what you're listening for. Your attitude is going to change the event. John Cage's 4:33. Today, your role, when we become aware of our own role in listening, in living, in following Christ, we especially learn a lot and become more mature spiritually, emotionally. I may have told this story before about hiring a Christian educator in Boise 20 years ago. She came in for the interview because we had got a few applicants and said, yeah, come in, interview. By the way, I talked to a friend that week at another larger church, and I'd say, hey, I'm interviewing for this position. What do you think? He says, Don, pay close attention to the first 30 seconds you spend with someone. It'll be conspicuously like the last 30 seconds you spend with them. Kind of an inflammatory, scary thing, except here's what happened to this wonderful woman who I hired. She came in 20 minutes late for the interview. Just before kind of cell phones, I didn't have one in my pocket. I don't know, like I said, 20 years ago. So my boyfriend's boss did this, so he had to change his shift, so he couldn't take the bus. So he had to take my car, so I had to take his car that's broken. His car normally works, but on the way here, this broke down. I could call AAA, but they said they needed this. She had a string of 5 or 6 things. And what I want to tell you is this. I know everything she told me was true. And there's something else. Namely, that I spent the next 5 years, until we had to cut her position for budgetary reasons, I spent the next 5 years involved in drama. You have people like this in your life. There's always something happening. And when you talk to them, it's always, and you just think, okay. And to be close to them is to be sucked into drama. A nauseating roller coaster that you kept on thinking, I didn't ask for this. Actually, I did. I hired her. Okay, so I'd tell my friends that I did hire her. She ended up being a good Christian educator. She had lots to learn about her personal life. This morning, when you were taught history, were you taught both the great time, history is made by events, versus the great man, it would have been in our time, the great man, great person theory? That's where we are today. One view of history, there's events happen and change us. Others know there's great people that happen, and they have something in them, in their hearts, in their volition, and their skills that change and make history. Two kind of competing theories of how history happens. We know there's a tension. Here it is for me. Saw Rocket Man a couple weeks back. I like Elton John okay. I think Elton John leans towards the great time. That if he had been 4 years earlier, he would have been a nobody. And I think by the time 4 years passed, he was writing nobody music. Might have some Elton John fans here. But there was a range where he was so huge, literally responsible for 5% of the music sales on the planet for a time in the early 70s. But I think he's good. I don't think he compares to the Beatles, who I believe fall more in the great person category of, had they been 5 years earlier or 10 years later, they still would have been fantastic. As a matter of fact, in addition to Rocket Man, now we have just released yesterday is the movie of what would happen if the Beatles were forgotten entirely and reintroduced in 2019. And the answer for the movie is they'd still be great because it's their music. It's something about them that is extraordinary regardless of the time. Today, two views of history and leadership living in Christ. One you might consider an event episodic, vertical. The other I'm leaning towards taking our own agency. When you talk to people, think about this. Someone came to the office last week. Oh, I hadn't seen her for a while. Hey, how's it going, Don? And I started to report things. Well, this happened. And then I changed and said, Julie and I are planning on taking a vacation. I'm doing this. I'm feeling pretty good about my dad. When people tell you, people are always telling you who they are. And some of us, it's always, what has happened to me? Usually tales of woe. And others, it's, I'm doing this. I'm deciding to do this. I'm going to do this. Agency. Horizontal. All right. Today, Galatians says, for freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. This is wonderful freedom. Do not use your freedom as an opportunity, however, for self-indulgence. Now, I don't talk about self-indulgence much except in one category, because I don't talk about people's issues with food or what they're doing. When self-indulgence always comes up for me, it's almost always only talking about jazz. When I'm talking to my brother or my nephew or my daughter, we talk about the discipline of improvisation. Here's where we are today. That when you play, when you noodle through a little solo like I did and try to shape something in Hornsby songs, you need some limits. And what we'll say about maybe fusion music from the 70s, Marty, sometimes, or a jazz solo is, it's kind of self-indulgent. I didn't feel like it went anywhere. Yes, I'm sure Pat Metheny is the best guitar player I've ever known. Brad Meldau, the best keyboardist. And sometimes I think, could we have a little restriction, limit our freedom, and not be so self-indulgent out of love? Today, improvisation in living versus indulgent, random, look, I'm having fun playing, you should sit there patiently and sit through this. All right. In 1959, I talked about this last week because that's the year of my birth, and I just turned 60. The thing that I didn't mention was this, the most important jazz album of the century. Miles Davis' Kind of Blue. By the way, Peter Frampton, famous guitar player, the greatest guitar player of rock and roll, was asked just recently the desert island disc question. Peter, you're marooned for the rest of your life on a desert island, but luckily there's one outlet, and look, someone left a record player. And you've got one record to bring with you. What do you wish you had? It's a great question to ask your friends who love music. Frampton, who's such a guitar so reliant on Beatles and rock and roll and everything, and I thought, here we go. He said, oh, easy, Kind of Blue. Every time I listened to that album, I learned something new about music. Something about theory and feel and playing. That's mine. I was so surprised. All right. Turn to Luke. Here's our other text for today. These texts, by the way, come up in lectionary, paired together, which I like a lot. Both freedom, but freedom in Christ, that we're still somehow slaves, limited, self-intentionally limited. Here's Luke 9. I'm on page 70 of your Pew Bible. Luke 9, 57 to 62. It's a great image. for would-be followers of Jesus. It goes like this. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Humanity has nowhere to lay his head." To another he said, "Follow me." But this guy said, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home." And this is such a hard response by Jesus, one of the hardest responses we get from Jesus, I think. Jesus said to him, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Ouch. They seem like such good excuses. No one who's plowing down the furrow and looks back is fit for the kingdom. It's a great image. If you're going to go straight, you can. Friends, if you are too self-conscious about where you have been, what has happened in your life, you can't follow Christ well. You need to rest on grace. And now that we're forgiven and we're moving on. Here's my brother. He's on the left playing trombone, improvising. Norm is in a ska punk band. I don't know if you spend a lot of time listening to ska punk. I'm sure some of you do. We got to hear them last summer. They're very loud, very wild. This is his saxophone player. And if you can see, shorter hair than mine, and a sleeve, as in tattoos up and down. What you don't see is bass player, drummer, lead guitar, singer / screamer. And Norm's making up horn lines for the two of them. As Norm tells people, "I'm in this band, it's called Bed on Red." And he says, "Yeah, the average age is 35. And what he means is they're all 25. My brother's just 3 years my senior. He's the best musician I know. I'm a jack of a few trades. Norm can play that trombone in ways you can't believe because he's focused on one thing. Really gifted. And we always talk about improvisation. And we talk, "Did you hear this? Yeah, I thought it was a little self-indulgent, but I love this part. You know, they needed an editor." That kind of thing. Friends, welcome to summer. Welcome to summer where weird sermons go to die. Or, as you might think of it, sermons that I haven't been able to fit in the rest of the year. Because I have the lectionary, that good structure of what's going on come late November. We're getting into Christ the King and Advent and Christmas and Common Time, and then we're into Lent and Easter, and we just got done with Trinity like 2 weeks ago. Summer is when things that have been pushed off the side of my desk, in this case a sermon I've thought about for a couple of years regarding music theory and discipleship, is where we are today. And so it's a little peculiar, it's a one-off. Walt and Eileen, you ought to come back next week when they're having a real preacher here. Who you know and love dearly. You guys, Dave Van Dieren is a friend of mine. He's going to be leading worship, and next week, of course, communion. He's also got a gorgeous voice. He's going to be helping the band out while Julie and I are on a little vacation. So come here, Dave Van Dieren. So here's what I want to show you today. I want to show you the piano scale. You already know this if you know a little about music. It's called the Ionian scale. Here's C. And you see, when we get to C, D, E, and F, there's a half step. You hear that? It's not a whole step. And then to the end, the B to C is also a half step. There's 12 half steps in the scale. They're on the communion table as well, if you can see. Here's what I mean. When we sing a scale, we go up a whole step, up, da, 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 da. The red's at half step. Ba, 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 da, 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 only half step. There's your major scale. It's made up of whole steps and half steps. And I suppose if you're a classical music listener, it's only 80% of the music you listen to. If you listen to rock and roll and pop, it's 9% of the music you listen to is based on this scale. When we think of this scale, it sounds kind of happy to us because of that third, the C to E. We're going to move beyond this in a minute. It's a bright sound. It's where a lot of our music is written. All right. Here it is in circle form. By the way, I was making a cardboard thing. I was spending a long time on it. Just cut it in circle. Had it going to move the disc in the middle, and I found this. Luckily, saved me a lot of time. Here's the Ionian scale. It's made up of a whole step, a half step to get from note to note. A whole octave is the way we think about music. It's the outer rim of where the notes are, and you can see C to D is the second step, E is the third step, and then it's only a half step to F, E, F, G, A, B, C again, only a half step. This is stuff that you know intuitively, you hear all the time, and maybe it's old news to you, but it might be kind of strange. This is the code, the Ionian scale, what it's made up of, those steps and how they're related to each other. You can put the Ionian scale in any key you want. I turn that disc to now we're in D, D. And now to follow the major scale, D, E. Look how we have to avoid F. D, E, F sharp, and then it's to G, A, B, C. We got to go D flat. The 7 is there. Rotating around. You can play the major Ionian scale in any of 12 keys. It doesn't matter. You can play any song in any of 12 keys. It'll feel happy and chippier, unless if Megan Case was here, she has perfect pitch. She'd say, no, I only like that song in E flat. I can tell if you're playing it in G, even though they're both major. You know, the rest of us, we have relative pitch often. So, those steps. You can play it in G, of course. As we get in different keys, that relation of whole step to half step still sounds bright. You could even play it. How about this in D flat? It's a piano player's nightmare. The gray pieces are the black notes. So if we're going to do a major scale in D flat, where the purple is, the next note, the second is E flat. Then we go to F and F sharp for the fourth. A flat. Oh, this is hard. C, C, that's every black note on there. Boy, when we have music on a Sunday morning that's pitched in D flat, you'll know because I put a capo on my guitar. Capo shortens my string by a fret, so I play C here, but I've shortened it. Now it's sounding D flat. And Sue is brooding over here because she's got to figure out all these darn notes on the piano that doesn't have a capo. This is D flat, a difficult key to play in. One person who writes a lot in D flat and E flat, Stevie Wonder. Pop music that I'm thinking, those white notes are easy to miss. The black notes you can feel better. Ionian. All right, bear with me. Most of the music you listen to, rock and roll, is based on a 1-4-5. It's in this major scale, so you play in C chord for a while, and then you move to F or G, but you're not going to be moving to E, something D flat. It's just the way our ears are made. So much what we listen to is 1-4-5, easy to play, and you can play it in any key. Springsteen gets teased because he does requests. 370 songs, Marty?
365.
365? Marty sent me a list. Thanks, Marty. This took me a long time. Springsteen's 365 songs ranked in order worst to best. Great article. Great article. The thing is, Springsteen will take requests from the audience. That's a lot of number of songs. And then depending on his voice, how he's singing, someone hears to hear a song we haven't played in years, you got to know it, and he'll call back A flat. And they're off and running. He says, if you're in my band, you got to be able to play any of these songs in any key. That's tough. Although it's rock and roll, so it's not as tough as it might sound. All right. Now, we call this a mode. It's that relationship of those steps to one to another. This is the Ionian or major mode, mode 1. I want to show you a different mode today. It's called the Dorian mode, where